If you are unsure as to why you want to be a physician, or maybe you know why you want to be a physician, but you just can't articulate it properly without help pushing you in the right direction, then medical schools are going to be very shy at accepting you because burnout is real and it is an issue in medical school and beyond. Application Renovation Season 2, Episode 5. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you about your application. You have a unique application, a very similar one we had in Season 1 that got a lot of traction and really helped a lot of people understand some of these nuances. So I'm hoping that we can help a lot of students as well. So before we dive into your application and really take a look at it, I think you've had some success with the application cycle just in terms of getting some traction, getting some interviews. Is that correct?
Yes. I've had a total of 4 interviews so far.
Okay.
At a couple MD schools.
Great. Let's talk about where do you think your application falls down, either from a lack of more interviews or post-interview, if you think your application is hurting you, or if maybe there's some interview issues?
Maybe there's a little bit of both. I think looking back at myself, just starting off the bat, when I looked through my list of schools that I applied to, I think I was way over ambitious. And I think, and as far as the secondary apps go, I applied to a total of 30 schools, and I'm sure a lot of pre-meds can relate to this, but when the rush of secondary apps started coming in, I started getting really overwhelmed. And
I think it was 33 schools when I counted.
It was 33, yeah, I think. So I just couldn't find time for myself to get enough feedback from people on individual secondary applications. I did have a couple written up. Yep. Just for common questions, but I didn't get somebody to look over it thoroughly. So
okay, did you use secondaryapps.com at all for the pre-writing or no?
I did not. Okay. I think I might have just looked at a website and just saw like, okay, here are like the 12 most common questions, and kind of read off of those.
Alrighty. All right. So lots of schools that you applied to, and then what about just your general primary application? Do you think you have any weaknesses there, or do you think that's pretty solid?
I think, well, here's the thing. My MCAT score, I think I might have taken it twice to get the score I wanted. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't think my GPA and MCAT are too much of a concern, to be honest.
Yep.
Maybe my personal statement, might be an issue just because I've only really had like 2 people thoroughly read it over and give me feedback on it.
Okay.
So maybe that could be another factor.
Who are those 2 people?
One person was someone I kept around from college when I was applying for undergrad, and I had to read over my college essays.
You kept them around? It sounds like they were like locked in a closet somewhere. I kept you around.
Yeah, she's actually in a basement right now of my house. No, I'm kidding. And then the other person was a friend of a coworker of mine.
Okay.
So.
All right. All right. Well, with that information, let's go and walk through your application and see if we can highlight anything and see if we can figure some stuff out.
Okay.
All right. So as I'm looking at your application here, the first thing that I see, you applied day 1, right? Application opened up May 31st, 2019. You submitted May 31st, 2019. So good job with that. Apply early is great. I actually don't necessarily recommend applying day of because the AMCAS in the past has had some issues where it just throws people off on that first day. Looking through, you speak several languages, which is always something that schools potentially may look at, so that's great. No big red flags institutional action-wise, misdemeanor, felony, so that's great. First class A-, so obviously that's a red flag. Just kidding. So your GPA, A's, B+, no huge red flags there. Science GPA 375, overall 381. Great GPA. And then as we bring in your MCAT score, as you said, you took the MCAT 3 times, 512, 515, 517. So I want to pause right there because a lot of students are going to look at this and go, wait, you retook a 512? Like, why? Why did you do that? Wait, you retook a 515? Why did you do that? So I want to hear kind of the thought process behind why you were really shooting for the stars with that MCAT score.
Well, upon first glance, I think that overall score does look great. I will agree with you on that. But then when I looked at the distribution of the scores, I think that 124 on the car section, the first time I took it, was personally really concerning for me.
Okay.
And considering, I really wanted to go for, one of the top schools, MD schools, which looking back at that, might also be a bit ambitious. But I just thought maybe it would be the best to maybe take another year off and see if I could retake the MCAT and do a lot better on my car section, maybe even out the distribution of my MCAT score.
Okay. And so I'm assuming looking at that second test, so 124 obviously is there. And a lot of students have that question, right? I have a really solid overall score, but I got a 124, I got a 125, and all my other ones are 130s. Is that going to be a concern? And I would say for 99% of students, for most schools, it's not a concern at all. You went up to a 125, and so probably it's the same thought process. Like, I didn't improve it enough, let me do more. And then you crushed it the next time, right? Up to a 128. So great job with that. For most students, I would say retaking it, definitely not something that most students need to do, should do. And if you look kind of statistically, you're in the rare bucket of being able to improve a score that already started off so high. So that's good. And we'll talk at the end a little bit more about your ambitions and the kind of the thought process behind it. I'm definitely not against having super high ambitions, but I think a lot of times they're misplaced ambitions. So we can talk a little bit about that at the end. And then we get into the experience list. So we have research right off the bat, something that you're doing kind of actively, which is great. You did a good job of putting stuff out into the future, which a lot of students forget to do or don't think they can do. So you did that, which is great. You have a little bit of a sales pitch here right off the bat of like, I diligently conducted mouse neurobehavioral experiments, right? The goal of this isn't to be super like, I am a hard worker, I'm diligent, I'm compassionate, I'm hardworking, blah, 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 blah. Right? So just that type of language is just a turnoff for a lot of people.
Just more of like telling it as it is then.
Tell it as it is, right? One of the favorite things that I like to do when it comes to research, talking about story, is tell me about a time you screwed up. Like, oh, there's one time like I screwed up this reactant and it pushed back our study like 2 weeks, and here's what I learned about it. Right? It's just a fun little story. Everyone messes up. Research is really hard to tell a story because it's not a lot of interaction with other people to really have those stories to build upon. But telling a story potentially in that way, like, oh, this one time the mouse bit me on the finger and I dropped it and it ran away and it took us 3 hours to get it, right? That's a fun little story that I think a lot of people could potentially resonate with, right? And students watching this, they'll see that I have highlighted here hours. So you have a lot of hours from 2018 to 2020, the 1,300 hours as a research assistant, 1,000 hours from 2018 to 2020, 600 hours project intern from 18 to 20, 1,900 hours from 18 to 20 as a medical scribe, physician shadowing, 1,200 hours from 18 to 20. And when I do the math, I'm looking at 58 hours a week with all of those activities. And that's a lot of hours per week. And maybe that's realistic, but I just want to make sure that students understand that the math is very easy to calculate and schools will work out that math to make sure that you're not fluffing up your numbers to make them look good. So if this is all you're doing, and I think looking at when you graduated school was right around that same time when all of your hours started bumping up. And so it makes sense, right? If you're not in school anymore, then you do have that bandwidth. So I'm sure for you that those are real hours. I just wanted to point it out because they are big numbers.
Can I ask something about the end date? Would it be appropriate here to set it as, June 2020, for example, if otherwise you have anything else that pops up, that's what you're expecting to,
Yeah.
that finish everything off?
Yep, 1,000%. AMCAS specifically in their instruction manual says, go, if this is something you're expecting to do, go until the expected start date, right? Expected matriculation of medical school. And a lot of times that's like August of 2020 that a lot of students will put. And it's not like, oh my God, like I can't stop doing this because I put on my application that I'm expected to do this. Like things change, jobs change, whatever happens. You're not like locking yourself into these things, putting them out that far. But I think students really need to just make sure they're being realistic with their hours, they're being realistic with really what they are planning on doing, and don't get caught in some lies, which has happened before, unfortunately. All right, back to the application. So you have research there, 1,300 hours, so tons of research. You have tutoring, 1,000 hours. I marked here, like, tell a story. One of the favorite things that I love with tutors, with TAs, with telling a story is tell me the story of a student who really struggled, right? The most memorable student that you worked with, that they just struggled and struggled and struggled, and you had to really work hard. Tell that story. That shows a lot more than you seeing confidence grow in both your students and yourself, right? That's just a very generic thing to see and read. Tell me the story about little Timmy and how you were able to help him overcome his struggles and he aced his SATs, right? You are a medical scribe, which is great. Good clinical experience. Again, storytelling is one of the biggest parts of the application that I think students miss. They go, okay, I'm going to write that I was a scribe, and then I'm going to just write all my job duties. And this is very similar to what you did, right? Starting off, I compiled with precision, right? Going back to diligently with precision, right? It seems a little corny when I say it like that, right? But it is. It's corny.
I know.
You say I recorded.
Looking back at myself, it's like everyone knows what a scribe is. Why did I write that?
Exactly, right? I recorded their history of present illness, physical exam, right? Of course, right? That's what a scribe does. Yeah. And so, again, the descriptions, at the end of the day, when you write like that, it's corny, it's silly, it's generic, but at the end of the day, what's the opportunity that you're missing out on is the opportunity to show who you are. Okay? And not from a standpoint of look how hardworking I am, look at how amazing I am, but just the experience that you had and how it was impactful for you. All right, physician shadowing, tons of hours. So from a clinical experience standpoint, you're doing great. You're scribing, you're getting research, you're quote unquote checking all of the boxes, hopefully proving to yourself that this is what you want. You haven't done a good job of really showing me why this is what you want yet through the descriptions, but hopefully your personal statement does that, and we'll get to that in a minute. Okay? Cope Health Scholars, great experience. I've been talking with them lately. They're a good organization. Student advisor. So all of these experiences, non-medical, medical, lots of great experiences that really show me that you really understand kind of who you are as a person. You obviously getting lots of experiences, hopefully great communicator as a tutor, all of these things, right? You are the director of communications. That tells me, hey, obviously, hopefully you can communicate diligently. All right, and then we get to the personal statement, which is something that you had brought up as potentially a concern, maybe a weakness in your application, and I would agree, right? I don't think there's a lot of personal statements I come across that I'm like, that was an amazing personal statement. That's not the issue. So we get to your personal statement, and right off the bat, we get into a story, which is good, right? You say, I'll make it a little bit bigger here. On July 4th, 2012, there were fireworks going off in room 6345 of the burn ICU at UC Irvine Medical Center. Yes, on the 4th of July, out of all places I could have spent the holiday, there I was playing an array of colorful chords and an explosion of emotions. You got way too fancy, and I have no idea what I just read. I read that like 3 or 4 times last night. I was preparing for this call today, and I'm like, fireworks going off in the burn ICU. I'm like, what does that mean? Are you talking about like, is a patient crashing? Are there literal fireworks going off because it's July 4th and somebody crazy brought in like sparklers and is doing something in a burn unit? And so you're saying that you're playing an array of colorful chords, which a lot of people might not understand what that means. Colorful, it's hard to say. Colorful chords, obviously playing music of some sort. Okay. An explosion of emotions. Are those the fireworks? The explosion of emotions? So in my mind, it's just too creative, too many questions that I'm left with. And remember, the goal of the personal statement is, why do you want to be a doctor? So I'm left with, well, why are you telling me this? Right off the bat, why am I reading this? You get to junior year of high school, you traveled floor to floor across different ICUs and played the piano in hallways. Great. So obviously you're starting from a young age, you're in the hospital. My question is, why? Why are you in the hospital to begin with? You leave with the kind of takeaway from that first paragraph is, it made me feel more patriotic than I've ever felt on any 4th of July. Okay. The goal of this is to tell me why you want to be a physician, not that you're God bless America here, right? So right off the bat, kind of first paragraph, I'm confused as to why I'm reading this, okay? You continue on here to my pleasant surprise as I finish the piece. So you're continuing the same story. And a lot of times with personal statements, if I have to kind of jump to the next paragraph to continue a story, I'm going to get lost pretty easily. Right? Remember that people reviewing this are reviewing things pretty quickly because they have a lot of applications to read. And the more that you can kind of like just segment the parts of the personal statement to say, here's one story, here's another, not here's a long couple paragraphs of one story where I have to keep track of things in my head, it might make it a little bit better. And that might be just a personal choice for me because I'm a terrible reader, but that's just how I look at the application. So you say, you looked up, you saw the patient's eyes filled with the green light of the end of the dock. I have no idea what that means. Can you explain what that means to me?
This was actually suggested to me by one of my people that read my personal statement. So originally how I had it written was, I looked up and saw the patient's eyes filled with tears.
Yeah.
This person wanted me to change it to the green light at the end of the dock.
What the heck does green light at the end of the dock mean?
I think she was trying to make a reference to the way she explained it in The Great Gatsby, where the main character looks over the end of the the water and sees a green light at the end of the dock.
Yeah, terrible decision. Number one, I've never read The Great Gatsby. Number two, a lot of people reading this probably haven't read The Great Gatsby unless it was like required reading in elementary school or middle school or high school, whenever that was. It's too creative, and this is a very common mistake where students are taking too much feedback from other people. You have to tell your story, not like, you should change this word because I think it's going to be better. I have no idea what this means. I'm completely lost. And even with if her eyes are filled with tears, I understand that now. I can understand, okay, she was obviously emotional. I'm still left with the question of, why is that important to me? Why is that important to you? Right? Why do you want to be a doctor? That's the goal of the personal statement. Okay? And so you have this conversation with the patient and who she is. You get to the end and you said, I have always wished there was more I could have provided this patient. So good reflection there, right? It shows me the interest in the continuation of wanting to do more for the patient. So that was good that you got to that point. It just took a long time to get there, and I was confused most of the way. Okay? And then she died. We've had a lot of death themes in the previous episodes. And then you get into the next paragraph here of you're in the lab studying psychology and relationship health. So again, why do you want to be a physician is the goal of this essay. Talking about being in a psychology and relationship health lab doesn't seem like it's an appropriate thing to talk about in a personal statement. You talked about several couples sitting and each partner sat still in a room filled with warm cookies, right? I think of psychology and relationship health lab. I'm like, is this like where people go and they make love in front of like a psychologist to see if they're doing it right? And you're talking about warm cookies? I'm like, what kind of weird stuff's going on here? Anyway, so you tell this example that you would convene the partners and process heart rate data. So a very common thing that students like to do is talk generally, which is what you're doing here. Generally, I would reconvene the partners and process. Versus you can't say generally, I sat Sally and Tom down to talk with them, right? The more specific of a story that you can tell, the more impactful it will be. And the better I will connect with it. Just like you told the story of this one 75-year-old patient. Right? Mm-hmm. You got to the end of this, and your reflection for this story, and again, I don't think this story really belongs in your personal statement because it's not really healthcare related, and the reflection kind of strengthens that kind of thought. Is the reflection is it is here where I realized that what draws me towards medicine is the ability to use this knowledge of emotion and engage with patients as, first and foremost, fellow human beings. And so you're saying, right, if I were to paraphrase that, you're saying, I want to be a physician because I have this knowledge that I need emotions to connect with humans. Right? It's almost like the AI that finally realized in the robot how to interact with a human. They're like, oh, I get it now. I can be one of them, right? So it doesn't tell me anything about why you want to be a physician. It's a very generic statement and kind of a weird statement that's like, I know how to interact with human beings. Therefore, I should be a physician. Okay? You got that?
Okay.
You get into the being a medical scribe, and just be careful here. It's a little confusing. This first line here says, in my current position as a medical scribe, I shadow Dr. whatever, right? Well, are you scribing or are you shadowing? Right? So just be careful with that communication there. Obviously, as a scribe, you are shadowing as you're scribing, kind of, but it's just a little confusing to read quickly. And then you did what is very common for students to do when they're lacking very significant clinical experience themselves, is you talk about the physician and you put the physician up on the pedestal, be like, oh, that physician is amazing. So you say, she listened to him, validated his concerns, assured him that everything would be okay. They exchanged laughs and talked about luxury cars. She counseled him, right? So you're talking about the physician and how you experience that physician. The goal of this is, why do you want to be a physician? Why do you want to be a physician? Not that you think this physician you're scribing for is amazing. Okay? This needs to be on you and your experiences, hopefully interacting with those patients and having a takeaway. And then again, a very kind of generic reflection. Physicians are not simply technicians. They bring the full spectrum of their human capabilities to the compassionate care of others. All right? True statement. I'll give you that. Again, it doesn't help me understand why you want to be a physician. Got it?
Yeah.
And then the next sentence, human connection is unique to medicine. Is it? Really? I think human connection is unique to being human, right? Every relationship and friendship and so you have this theme. As I'm kind of pulling back and reading this again for the second time, your theme in your personal statement is human connection, right? You talk about it. Maybe that's why you focused on the psychology lab. Is that's where you first brought in this human connection through emotion and engaging with patients. That's human connection. And then in the next paragraph, talking about this physician, human connection, right? This full spectrum of human capabilities for compassionate care. Again, the human connection. And then the next paragraph, human connection is unique to medicine. So that's your theme. I don't know why potentially you focused on it. I don't know if you really tried to focus on it, but that is what you focused on. And again, you understanding that human connection is what you think is important to being a physician is not the goal of the personal statement. This doesn't help me understand why you want to be a physician. And again, I would disagree that human connection is unique to medicine at all. Mm-hmm. So I would agree after reading this personal statement, I think you got interview invites in spite of your personal statement or despite of your personal statement. I think somebody read your personal statement and probably scratched their head going, I'm really not sure why you want to be a physician. Let me go look at your secondary essays and hopefully they'll give me a little bit more context into who you are. Obviously a stellar student, right? Grades are great and that helped you get 4 interviews. I would say that your personal statement potentially hurt you from getting more interviews, right? Having a 3.7 plus GPA, 517 MCAT score should have opened up a lot of doors for you. And so your personal statement potentially hurt. And then where I'm more concerned about is your interview and the question about why do you want to be a physician? And if you're kind of rambling around a lot of the same themes that you have in your personal statement, that's probably where you fell flat as well. Because at the end of the day, and I get pushback from students all the time on YouTube. YouTube commenters are the worst, by the way. But anyway, I love you. Is like great stats will overcome everything. And it's just not true. If you are unsure as to why you want to be a physician, or maybe you know why you want to be a physician, but you just can't articulate it properly without help pushing you in the right direction, then medical schools are going to be very shy at accepting you because burnout is real and it is an issue in medical school and beyond. And they don't want a student coming in who has amazing stats but has no clue why they're there, because that student will burn out faster than everyone else. Does that make sense?
I understand.
So with that said, again, I get to the end of your personal statement and I'm still like, I don't understand why you want to be a doctor. And then we get to the school list, super aggressive school list, but you have very stellar stats to support all of the schools that you applied to. Way too many schools in my mind. Again, you kind of alluded to that, especially if you aren't pre-writing your secondaries, which is why I have the whole secondary essay database at secondaryapps.com, so that once you submit your primary, you can go to the secondary apps, see what essays are there for all the schools, pre-write them, and hopefully turn them in as fast as possible. With that said, what questions do you have?
How many would you recommend personally, just looking at if I were to spruce up, if I were to do this again and, work on my personal statement a little bit more, how many would you personally recommend for schools to apply to?
In my mind, any more than 20 or 25 is probably pushing it. A lot of people may say, look, with your stats, you only need to apply to 5 or 10. And I don't think that's true either, because every school's looking for something a little bit different, right? So on your school list, if I look here just to confirm, you do, right? You have UC Riverside on your school list. UC Riverside, based on who you are, probably isn't a good match for you, because they are looking for a very specific student who knows the Inland Empire, who wants to work in the Inland Empire, and has that exposure. And it doesn't look like potentially you have that, and maybe you do, but that's just an example of, like, if you apply to 10 schools, 8 of them might be wrong mission fit for you, and they may be able to see that through your application and won't invite you for an interview, right? I've had conversations with people at UC Riverside, which is why I pick them, because a lot of times they won't interview the 517 medical student. or pre-med student, because they know that a 517 medical student, unless they have very specific ties to the Inland Empire with their mission, probably isn't going to want to go there. Right? So it's a lot more, and this is why I do what I do and harp on this all the time. It's a lot more than stats. And so if you find 15 schools that you're like, this is great mission fit for me based on who I am and what I've done, and they can see that, then great, apply to 15 schools. If you're struggling to find great fit based on what you've done and who you are and what you want, then maybe you need to apply to a few more to just spread out that joy a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Thank you. And then as far as the letter of recommendations go, since I have been out of school for a little bit now, would you say it would be wise to go back to my science professors and ask them to?
So you've only been out of school now since 2018, looking at your application. So most schools are still going to want those letters from professors because it's only been a couple years. So I would maintain contact, reach out to them when you're ready to apply again. Reach out now, even if you're not going to apply this next cycle, and just maintain contact to say, hey, thank you so much for helping me with my last application cycle. Unfortunately, things aren't going very well, or things have gone great. I've gotten 4 interviews, but I haven't gotten any acceptances yet. There may be a chance I need to reapply. I would love to stay in contact with you throughout the year or whatever, and update you on what's going on, and hopefully get another letter, an updated letter from you in the future, and see what they say.
Okay. And then just one more last question. Thank you so much for your help, by the way. Is for the secondary applications, as far as getting feedback, would you say that I should try to get feedback for every single secondary application that I send out to schools? Or do you think rather I can try and write up a bunch of secondary responses and have those sent out for feedback?
I think in my heart of heart, almost everything should be reviewed. And that doesn't mean like go hire a professional company to give you feedback, but have someone who potentially understands who you are and potentially the stories that you're trying to tell, and really just look at it from the standpoint, because one of the biggest mistakes is students don't really answer the question. And so really have them look at it from a standpoint of, number one, are you answering the question? And number two, is it really getting across who you are as a person and potentially why you fit with that school? Because that's a very common question that comes into it. Now, with that said, after you get through 5 or 10 secondary essays from schools, right? 5 or 10 schools, secondary prompts, a lot of it is repetitive. So just use your own judgment as to whether or not you want feedback on this. Like, this is the same essay I wrote for this school. I don't need feedback on it. And just make sure, triple check that you're not copying and pasting school names into other schools' secondaries.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So hopefully, again, that one of the things I was hoping with this application, when I saw it come across, I was like, wow, great stats. The story is what's missing. And I really want to get across to students who are going... I
can see it in your shirt.
Yeah, your story matters. Students who are going onto Student Doctor Network or Reddit or My Premed Hangout and seeing feedback from students saying, I had a 519, a 520 MCAT, a 3.9 GPA. I didn't get into medical school. And students freak out. Students who have 3.4 GPAs and 5.08 MCAT scores. They freak out going, well, if that student couldn't get in, how am I going to get in? Well, you get in if you understand your story and you can tell it appropriately in your application. And so I think you obviously have a ton of experience. You're doing amazing things. It's just a matter of telling that story appropriately so that next time someone reads your essays, and you obviously got interviews, but on the interview trail as well, I'm assuming you probably didn't do as great of a job telling your story there as well, and you use lots of fun words like diligently and other stuff like that, to really hone in on who you are as a person. So hopefully this will set you up for success in the future. I wish you the best of luck, and please keep me updated on your journey.
Thanks a lot for your help.
Yeah.